right? It comes down to how bad's the crime. I can understand keeping certain funds secret so you can work on programs and keeping certain UAP programs secret because of the weaponization potential. But at some point, we're done with that. And we just need to say it like it is. Representative government represents us. It's now time to come clean on the UFO thing. And I think we're close to that, closer than we've ever been before, that we're fed up with it. And hopefully that has impact.
Josh says, a few years ago, both Jeremy and George hinted that there were at least 4 UFO programs. Can Jeremy elaborate on that any further?
I can't elaborate that any further. And I think that's kind of diminishing the truth, just by focusing on that one statement. There are many UFO programs. I became aware of a certain number of them early on, but there are kind of factions of groups. Think about it this way. Like if you had a craft, and in that craft was writing and was biologics and that kind of thing, then you would have whole teams of people. You would have linguistics people, you'd have just technology-based people, power and propulsion people that dealt with biology, you'd have anthropologists. So you could put all of that under one name. So definitely there's a pyramid here going on with UFO programs. For example, we also learned about Immaculate Constellation. We haven't had that conversation yet, but what was that program, or what is that program now under a different name?
Yeah.
And that program was an acquisition program where you would take and siphon off data, visual data of our exploitation, other nations' exploitation of those technologies, as well as just what they call NHI technologies, demonstrating things like instantaneous motion, like videos of this. You would pull them off the servers and collate them into a study group. That would be a pretty big project, right? So with the UFO programs, and why I brought that up, years before, is because I became aware of a certain number that were kind of housed other programs. But it's a pyramid, it's a trickle down. There are numerous UFO-related programs based upon what it is that we are analyzing. And you could come up with any arbitrary number, but there are some core programs for sure.
A personal highlight for me was when I spoke to George, I think back in December, I spoke to George about his new series, and I asked him a question we were talking about alien abductions, and I asked him, had he ever come across any research or programs where aspects of the government, the legacy programs, whatever they may be, had found a way to bring on abductions and trigger them themselves? And is that something you've come across or can talk on?
I like to stay within what I know to be the case. I do believe that George has been exposed to significant amounts of information related to UFO programs that, as a journalist, not many people have that. And I think he is perfectly positioned to talk about that. All I can say is I've been exposed to some information, and it appears that there's something more to the abduction phenomenon than I first thought. I would study it. If I was the government, I would study the fuck out of it.
That was
I'm not in a position, so sorry. Let me
No, okay.
I'm not in a position to offer more information on that I can stand behind. But like a lot of people, I might expect there to be more information.
That was a big topic of conversation again with John Blitch today around the abduction program, and he very much comes down on the reason for the secrecy isn't the lights in the sky, isn't the beings in the craft, because he's like, what good reason could you have for that? He believes it would have to be the abduction phenomenon, and that these crafts and entities, some of them, can take you, your children, whoever they want, at will, do what they want, and put them back. And whether there are agreements or not in place with said governments or factions, there's nothing they can do to protect you against that.
That would suck. I have been exposed to some reporting on military observed like implants and stuff like that have been studied Now, my ability to put a value on that is not as good as maybe George Knapp or people that actually ran some of these programs that looked at this stuff. So I hope they talk for themselves. I wonder if people like Dr. Colm Kelleher would know more about that. Some of you've had on the show before, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just I am very careful about going into those realms because there seems like a fear aspect to it. Look, it would suck if the dirty, deep secret, and the reason why a lot of these legacy program people, when I push all the way up to the edge and I say, what is so scary, what is so dangerous for us that you can't say anymore, that you just stop right there. And, when they're like, don't kick a sleeping dog or don't wake a sleeping dog, it makes you feel like, so what is so dangerous? What is so scary? I would guess that the abduction phenomenon, if it is what it appears to us to be, that is a terrible, terrible, frightening thing for human beings to have to contend with, that there are abductions. And I would suppose there are abductions. I would suppose that does happen because that has always followed the UFO topic. I mean, since the beginning of time when people reporting this, the abduction phenomenon goes way back. But again, it's so out there for me because I don't have tangible evidence or information I can convey. I can tell you I've heard everything. I'll be honest with, I'll be transparent with that, which is that I've heard it all. Now, do I put stock into that? I just don't have enough information.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, it's so speculative, and I'm always fascinated to hear people's testimony, and it ranges from these wonderful, almost heavenly-like experiences to plumbing the depths of hell, what some people go through in these abductions. And I almost wonder, is there an element, again, just speculation, and I'll take your comment on it.
Okay.
If these beings are doing these abductions almost quietly and not too brashly because there's a lack of knowledge or belief in NHI in general, and is there a danger that, and I'm trying to I suppose think of the government's point of view here, or whoever runs these programs. Imagine it was the case that, well, if everyone finds out and the human population now know that NHI exists and we are here, then we don't have to hide anymore, and literally en masse we will come and do this as we please, and we will pluck people out their beds or their jobs, their desks in the middle of the day, because But while people don't know, and while it's blissful ignorance, they go about it quietly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't pre-warn or want people to be fully aware if I was a species that was like bagging and tagging like antelope or something in a valley. I wouldn't go like whisper to the antelope and let them know everything that's going on. So I don't know, but what I think we should highlight is that as we learn more about the reality of UFOs, like the machines themselves, we'll start asking about operators or pilots of those machines. Then we'll start asking about agenda. Then we'll start asking about all the things in UFO lore that have collided with sightings. And one that is, we are incapable of getting around if you listen to people, is the abduction phenomenon.
Something I've recently started thinking about, and I'll really have to try and qualify it and write it down because I'm not eloquent enough. I've said that before to kind of spitball these things, but is quantity of craft. And I don't mean Bob Lazar says we have recovered 9 in a hangar. I mean, how many of these active craft are there? Because if they can manipulate space, time, whatever, travel at incredible speeds, you could essentially have a handful of craft operating at any one time in the globe, in the single digits, but people think there's thousands. There could be thousands of sightings of the same 5 craft. So is it that we have loads of these things visiting, or actually it's quite a small number, but that's a very hard one to pin down?
It is. I would suggest that at any given time, we have enough activity going on consecutively. Like just the 2019 events that George and I talked about, you had 14 on radar at one time. There were a lot more. I don't think that it's a matter of very few craft. I think that there are a lot of craft lot of the time. That's at least what the evidence shows me. I had a very dramatic friend back in the day before he died. His name was John Lear, the godfather of conspiracy, and kind of filmed with him for many years. Like, he had wild ideas. I'm not sitting here saying what he told you was true, but some of what he discovered was true. He had this very dramatic thing he'd say to me, and he'd be like, Jeremy, if you could see at any given time all the craft in our sky, the sky would be black. His standpoint was, we have so much happening all the time, and that they can cloak, and that we're not seeing them. My question to that is, look, it takes us like one tiny little satellite to map the entire surface of the moon in a week, right? The number of craft and the varied looks of these craft that are reported, it just doesn't add up. There's something else going on to have these many shapes and this much activity. So I don't know what the purpose would be to having so many different craft when we can go map the moon with a single orbiter in a very short amount of time. So I don't know the answer to it. I would suspect, though, that there has been both an increase of frequency and there has been better imaging technology to pick these things up. Maybe it's been the case, there's always been so much craft and we're just seeing them more, but I think there's two things going on at one time. And why, I don't know. Wish I did.
Before we talk about whistleblowers again, because a lot of the questions focused on that situation, you did mention the whole 2027 craft heading toward Earth thing, and you mentioned clips can be taken out of context. I got a lot of questions about that clip. A lot of them were, who's coming up with this? Is there a ship heading towards us? Etc. Can you just clear up what it was you said, the context behind it, so people are clear,
Sure.
and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to do so. But I'm not sure it will clean anything up because people seem to want to portray what I said in their own way. I think if you watch it, you'll understand. I was, again, saying the quiet part out loud. I don't need to tell you anything about those dates. They're everywhere. Every UFO person has gotten texts, or they have heard it, or they've been told it, and I shouldn't have to clean anything up. What I was saying is that I have heard that repeatedly over and over, that I have rooted it down to its origin, and I know that there is a document from the 70s that gave that idea to people, and that it was not enough information, and I thought that from what I looked at, what I was exposed to, that is something that people are portraying as, oh, something's coming. Now, look, I could be wrong, but in my show, and what a thing to be wrong about. Wow. But in my show, what I did was I said, hey, I am concerned about this. I am concerned you are all coming to me telling me you've been told about this. That this is something in the zeitgeist of the UFO public that I thought was very dangerous. I thought, we've all heard about, Project Bluebeam and all that stuff about a fake alien invasion. And so it was so on the pulse of what I've heard in our popular understanding of the UFO thing, and it was increasing, getting louder. I was calling it out, and I was saying, I don't trust it. I think it's bullshit. And I just wanted to say that so that people could hear my perspective on it. But that very quickly got turned into me saying, we're gonna have a fake craft coming and all this stuff. And that's not what I was saying. I was saying, beware of people telling you that. Beware of that general concept that I think it's bullshit and horseshit. Yeah.
So do you think in general then, and thanks for clearing that up, that we're in a time with things being so full on, with so much information being thrown at us all constantly, we're going to get a lot of, is it disinformation? I think that's a lazy term sometimes, but we're going to get a lot of things thrown at us deliberately just to muddy the water.
100%. That's what I kind of tried to raise the alarm about, is that as you get flooded, George says something like flooding the zone, like it's some term for football or something. I don't watch football, but flooding the zone. The idea that we're getting so much information bombarded that people are going to take advantage of that, and you're going to have a lot of kind of false prophets with this stuff, right? People that take credit for things that they didn't do, as if they're influencing this. Look, the UFO thing, man, it brings in so many huge feelings about the nature of reality and about what's going on, I do believe that we need to be on guard for false and bad information coming forward. I certainly do. I get all the time seeded with stuff that people want to just use my mouth for, maybe to cut me down later and say he was wrong. Newsflash, I'm wrong all the time. Ask my wife, But I do try to vet information and specifically people in an absolutely intense and dogged way before I bring it forward. So I do my best.
A good place to ask you then about Anna Polina Luna has just tweeted that she's got a big announcement coming next week.
Yeah.
Folks in the UFO community have latched onto this and went, it's UFO related, it's UAP related. Someone did ask her, and Jared Moskowitz replied saying, you're warmish. Now that to me doesn't reek of it's UFO UAP related, but that could be something along, and a good place to bring up that whole FBI working group situation getting outed and people being sacked. It could just be something around intelligence services. I'll stop waffling, but ask, have you heard much about this, and do you know if it is indeed UFO related?
Yeah, so I would, what I'll say is that I can imagine that it's transparency related, but I don't know for sure. Of course, I've heard from people what they think's going on. People, but I decline to just find out from her. I think that she should just speak for herself. So
yeah,
what is it? I'm sure everybody can wait a week. What is it? It's probably just about transparency. Great. It will apply to the UFO thing if it is. If there's some sort of executive order dealing with transparency with the intelligence agencies, that's a fucking win. So I'm assuming it's that. I don't directly know, and I don't feel like asking.
No, that's fine, and that's my kind of thoughts as well with it, that people have just looked at the statement and went, oh, it must be UFO related.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
Yeah. And when there's a lot coming out.
Yeah, I think it will probably be transparency based. I'm not a fortune teller though. Just wait and see.
Yeah, and people will soon enough. Perhaps after this goes out, perhaps before it, who knows. So on the whistleblower stuff then, this has been obviously the year of the whistleblower currently. It was almost the end of last year if you had got the chance to get that whistleblower sat down in Congress, but like you say, it maybe wasn't for that hearing anyway. Perhaps it was for a next hearing, depending on how things play out. So a lot of questions on whistleblowers. Casey asks, did Jeremy know about Jake Barber, and if so, why didn't you break his story first or mention his story previous to him coming out?
Yeah, so of course I think in the small circles of journalism, I did hear about Jake Barber. I didn't, he didn't come to me with the information, and it was also something that as I kind of saw it percolating, I knew it was in good hands. You can't do every story. I think that would be very weird. It takes a lot of... So I wasn't given the opportunity to jump into that story. I think there are other people better suited for that story. And also, a lot of people, maybe people don't understand this, a lot of people come to me in Georgia. A lot of people. And oftentimes, George and I are unable to do sufficient amount of background on somebody to be able to stand behind them. So people that are public now absolutely came to me and George early on. We didn't have enough to say we can get behind this. Like with David Grush, we could, absolutely. We had about a year, and he came to my home. I talked to other people he worked with. We were able to vet that information to the point where I would sit behind him in Congress and fight to get him to testify because I had sufficient time and experience to trust that information. So what I think the disconnect is people don't understand that a lot of the individuals that will come to us, we sometimes spend a year or so and then kind of hand off some of the information to other people. And other journalists do that with us too. You're better qualified to look into this. You have better sources. They're going to help you with that. And so I think that's kind of teamwork. That's like working together, even if you're not like working together on a case. So the Jake Barber story and account and what he did, from what I hear, it's on solid ground. but it was never something that I was given the opportunity to really dive into and assess for myself. But now I'm assessing it. Now I get to see it like you guys and find out.
Yeah, it's not that you're all sat in a room, yourself, George, Ross Coulthart, Michael Schellenberger, and whoever answers the phone first gets the story. That's just not how. That's not how these things work, obviously.
And I think whistleblowers also, there are certain people you can trust to a degree, so you might reach out for advice, not to break the story. Like, first thing I tell people is, okay, cool, if you're looking to be on TV in a movie or for me to break your story, then go somewhere else. Like, I'd love to hear what you have to say, but that's not the starting point. The starting point is, who are you? What do you have to say? Why are you calling? Then if I can say, hey, this journalist might be better positioned to unravel some of the stuff within your account, then absolutely we'll pass it over to other people. Sometimes it just stops dead in the water because there's nothing anybody can ever do to verify their claims.
So on that, I'm sure you've seen the egg video from the Jake Barber segment, 12-second clip. What was your thoughts on that piece of footage?
Looks like an egg. my thought, I'm not a video analyst. I do know that crash retrievals are real. I do know that crash retrieval of unknown origin are real. I mean, I personally know that. Like, I have enough evidence from my work. And that I do know that there are multiple programs to retrieve what they believe are NHI, non-human intelligence aircraft. So why wouldn't that be one? But that's as far as I got, right? I think what people need to now do is talk with the people that brought the story forward, talk with people who directly brought the footage forward, and look for origin of that footage and try to understand it better. So yeah, I'm like you, like I'm with you on it. I don't have any special knowledge on it. I just hope we get to the bottom of it.
You're assuming I don't have special knowledge on it. I don't.
I am. Maybe you do. Yeah,
sorry.
Turn the tables, Andy.
Yeah.
What's
transparency? I don't. But is there an element of, with this emerging narrative and all these different points of attack, whatever you want to call it, that people maybe have to reset expectations around what disclosure is and what it's going to look like? Because I think for a lot of people, there are elements to, if we just take the Barber story in isolation, it's one thing to have this guy come forward, incredible background, as you would expect, the CV's glittering, and he says, I was retrieving UFOs, essentially. You get a little bit of footage of something similar. We're not saying it was Jake who was part of that footage, it was a separate piece of footage. But then the story in the same breath evolves into psionics, overcome with emotions, and like a feminine, godlike energy, and it turns, and a lot of folks can't get their heads around that yet. But do we maybe just have to take a step back, and do you feel you have to do that yourself, even with what you know, and go, maybe this is genuine? How do you work with that?
Yeah, I don't dismiss it outright. I don't go around and do. How can you do a deep investigation on a part of that, right? Like that's up to the people telling you. I know that people have validated Jake Barber's background. I have no reason to doubt that he did crash retrievals. I think we should pay attention to what he has to say. And even if it's outside of our scope of comfort, I think we should pay attention to it. It doesn't mean you have to, just accept it all. Like everything needs rigor. But I do think we need to adjust a little bit. If this UFO thing is that weird, to me it's weird. If it is that weird, then we do need to recalibrate it. I will tell you this, man. This is not a new concept. I know a lot of people want like disclosure right now, and I'm so allergic to that term because maybe it's just from being in this field for a while. I don't really know what that means. Like, what is disclosure? Is it just the government telling you UFOs are real? They've already done that. Like, where does that end? Like, is it the president coming out and showing you a spacecraft and putting it, what's the show me state, Missouri? Putting a UFO in Missouri, right, on display where everybody can take their flamethrowers and torches and, hammers and try to dent this thing. Like, what is disclosure? I don't know what that is for each person. And I do know that even if you're just looking at something scientifically, just because something is weird doesn't mean you can dismiss it. You need to look at it. So yeah, I think we all need to have an open mind, but not let our marbles fall. Just because one thing is true doesn't make another thing true. We need to look at it. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is. And let's get to some other questions here. These kind of fall into the, I'm not sure what category to put them in. Metal Matt says, here's right out of left field. Has Jeremy ever seen a ghost, and what does he think of the Sasquatch phenomenon?
Oh wow. No, I don't. I don't have a lot of knowledge on kind of that thing. Have I ever seen it? That's wild. Not to my knowledge, no. So I've kind of been focused on UFOs. I mean, I find those other realms fascinating. Some people say they intertwine, you know? If you look at things like Skinwalker Ranch, where there's actual, like, you know, scientists claiming to see things come out of portholes, like, then that would be that crossover. I'm filled up just with UFOs, hardware, whistleblowers. I'm filled up already. I'm not dismissing it. I just haven't embraced it with my own studies.
Did you see Tom DeLonge's Monsters in California movie?
I did, but I got a bad recall for movies. I remember renting it.
That thing.
Yeah.
That covers a lot of phenomena all in one film. Even the Bigfoot in a cave comes out at one point.
Oh,
so,
really? Okay, I gotta rewatch it. Yeah.
Yeah. Dob says, would Jeremy agree that UFO, UAP commentators are all in different camps? They don't openly disrespect each other, but they have different agendas, different ideas on disclosure. I'm with Jeremy and George on this topic.
Yeah, are people at different camps? Like, no, we're all working towards the same goal. I think there is, in journalism, the old school mentality is there is competition for sure. You know, everybody wants to kind of, you know, see how much they can push the boundaries of getting scoops and that kind of thing. Man, I broke enough stories in my life, and I know George now has for sure. At this point, for me, it's about working together. That doesn't mean you got to go on every news show and be like, that other journalist is amazing. Oh, wow. Like, you know, that's not really your job. Like, your job is just to try to uncover this and bring stuff forward and report the news as you know it. So I want to back up from that question and say, I think there's a misunderstanding. I hope there is. I don't think these are separate camps. I think we're all fighting towards a similar goal. Now, of course, some people are more sensitive than others, you know, when it comes to how they're trying to do this. I've had to drop that sensitivity to a high degree because anytime you're reporting on this, you're gonna have slings and arrows coming at you. And I think that's a mistake too, is to feel good by what other people think about you, just as you'd feel bad about the way other people think about you when you're reporting. You just gotta do what you think is right. We're not in separate camps. That's an illusion. We're all together, whether or not people hug it out or not.
Yeah, I've always said that with the podcast stuff. Anytime listeners come in, and if you get a guest on first after a big story, or, you know, let's just say Lou Elizondo's book comes out, whether you are the first or 50th interview doesn't really matter, because if you're the 50th, you've got 49 other interviews to dig into, get a goldmine of information and follow up on. But you know what? If you're the first, yep, you're the first person to ask the initial questions. The snow is white, there's no footprints, but you can make the most of no matter where you are in these. And I've never felt that either, that there has to be competition. You should just make yourself as kind of good as you can.
Yeah, I do think there's value in sometimes reminding people of the history of interviews. So I do think when you do something and you've worked harder and you get somebody there first, I think it's important to remind people, because then they can see that originating information and then how it evolves or devolves. So there is importance in acknowledging the first time that somebody speaks out and what they say, and watching how that evolves or devolves based on that. But yeah, man, I love the way you're thinking, because when you do your show, you do have the depth of information if you're getting somebody after they've done a bunch of interviews. I think it's a really smart way to look at it.
Yeah, not that, you know, someone wants to come on here instead of Joe Rogan first, I wouldn't accept that. That's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. But I imagine they're going on 2 million downloads an episode, Joe Rogan first, you know.
Right, but that it's totally different. Like Joe doesn't necessarily have somebody who's speaking out first on his show, right? Like
Yeah.
he'll wait to see what evolves so that you can have a conversation that is really well rounded, and I think
Yeah.
that's really smart. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. Jamie asks, has Jeremy tried remote viewing CE5 or guided meditation? And if so, what's he found the most effective?
yeah. So I'm not the best candidate for being somebody you should look to for that information, because I'm just like not maybe psychically connected to those types of things. I don't know, but I've documented other people doing it for a long time. I actually never put out that footage, but one of my first films that I put together, I haven't put it out because it's still evolving. It was called Looking Up, and it was about this group of people who were friends of mine that were laughing at me because I told them, hey, I'm following this guy. Every time he's whatever, he doesn't have a house or whatever, right? But he would look into the sky and tell me something's coming, and then sure enough, I'm filming and something appears, and I thought it was really weird. So I was trying to document that. I was telling some of my friends about it. They were just laughing at me. I'm like, look, man, I'm following the evidence where it's going. Here's a guy saying he can do it. Here's the thing in the sky. I'd show him the footage. Again, it's never like a craft, like the most beautiful thing. So I was very skeptical. What was this guy seeing? But I thought that was a story too. But that was back in like 2011. So I kind of followed that along the way. And sure enough, some of my friends who were laughing at it had these really profound experiences, and to this day they will tell you there is something to this, and it has been very impressive to them, and I have witnessed some of that. There may very well be a very strong connection between human consciousness and what we perceive as UFOs. I am not an authority on it. I'm not even good at it, but there are other people who I think would be better suited to tell you what to do. But from my experience, it was just like asking to see something and being calm. And some of these individuals have documented some pretty wild things in the sky after that.
Cool. Last couple of questions, and then I can let you go, Jeremy. Jeremy. Someone's literally called themselves Purple Burglar, knowing full well Scottish people can't say that. So, Purple Burglar. What an arsehole. Says the first question is, do you know what those drones over the US actually were?
I do not. What I do know is that you're being lied to, straight up from the White House. Because, and let me qualify that, a lot of people who were participating in the defense of critical infrastructure, I won't call them sources, I'll call them contacts, right? They're not giving me anything. We're breaking it down for them. There were these communications between the FAA and these defense locations. The FAA had no idea. The FAA had no idea where these were coming from, to the point where they put up restricted flying zones because they did not authorize these flights. So I know you're being lied to by the White House, or somebody gave them bad information and they're repeating it. That's possible too, don't know. But there were events surrounding these critical infrastructure sites that dealt with absolutely bizarre shaped UAP coming up out of the water, on camera, documented on FLIR, and hovering over these bases. You can take that to the bank. And those were not craft, like you know them. So I don't know exactly what was going on over the New Jersey skies, and I know for a fact it wasn't just New Jersey skies, and that this is something that's been going on for a long time, and that it is important for us to find out more, but I don't know ground truth on that. I just know you're being lied to.
What stood out to me was it ran over 2 administrations, so people kicked off at Biden for not coming out and doing anything. People are now disappointed Trump has come out with the whitewashing of it, and that just says to me that there is something else, someone else in the background making these calls, making these decisions, giving this information to say, here's what it is. And let's be fair, if they go to Trump and say, this is what it was, what does he do with that? He can't say, well, no, it isn't. So he's going to have to run with that, and his advisors will have to run with that, won't he?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he could dig in more and say, wait a second, that makes zero sense. So I'm not just going to repeat that or have my aide repeat that. I'm going to dig in. You'd hope that's what's happened. I mean, especially because certain presidents have come forward and said they've been lied to about the UFO phenomenon. You would hope that. We didn't see that. But maybe that story isn't over yet, though. I don't know. I would hope they would dig in because it's absolutely nonsensical and bullshit.
And a second question from that listener, I'm not saying the name again. At what point would we need to be at for you to consider dropping hard disclosure? And I think you'll know what they're getting at there, basically everything you know. Complete stagnation from the government, World War III, what would it be?
Right. So it's making an assumption, right? That question's making an assumption that I have somehow with George obtained anything that would cause that reaction, right? To be, that's hard disclosure, case closed. That's just not true. It's not true. I'm still vetting information. If you watched the show that I put out, I sit on a lot of information, but not idly, because I have found over time some of it that has come our way that we've been exposed to was incorrect information. Some of it was fabricated. Some of it was good, but it also puts individuals who have informed us in awkward positions that are not worth, breaching that trust. Sometimes people just show us, tell us, supply us information with the express understanding this is for our knowledge and to help us move forward and ask better questions.
Sure.
So I don't think I'm in the position that people think I'm in, that if I dropped everything I have, that it would really do what they're thinking or allegedly have, right? What I've been exposed to or have access to. If I was able to somehow magically put all of that up all at once, would it really be a benefit to this conversation, or would it be a distraction? I hope that by the time George and I ever put anything out, that we have done our due diligence to the point where we are 100% rock solid. And we've tried every time to do that. Hit or miss, that's our attempt moving forward. Will you see more from us in our reporting? I certainly hope so. But people also have to understand there are traps that are set for journalists these days. And you can have really good information, but the intent of getting that to you is so that you can be controlled or stopped later. That's just true. That's a briar patch.
One of the big ones for me on that sort of question, and I know it's common for people to ask that or want to know what big UFO journalists know, was when Ross Coulthart mentioned about a UFO so big they built a building over it, and